Alright guys, so Formula 1 pay drivers, what exactly are they? Well, to start off, let's just say pretty much every single Formula 1 driver, especially today, is to some extent a pay driver. Why? Because a pay driver is somebody who used some sort of financial backing to get them a seat in the sport. And considering motorsport in general is one of the most expensive sports to get into, every single driver on today's grid needed that source of finance to be able to even begin their junior careers. I mean, have you seen the price of a go-kart? Or the fresh tires they need race after race? The maintenance costs? And that's just karting, the bottom of the ladder. It gets a lot worse as you climb your way up through the ranks. So since most of these guys had parents willing to let them drive go-karts at such a young age, with no guarantee that it would lead on to anything, that already says enough about where these guys were financially before their careers even began. Gambling that kind of money on a child's hobby isn't something most people can afford. I mean, when I was about 10 years old, simply joining a football club was already enough to shoot you into the upper echelon of society. Most kids just owned a half a decade old Champions League ball that was just begging to be thrown into the bin. Owning a miniature car? That was some Jeff Bezos stuff right there. You may as well have had a super yacht, cause to us it was all the same. So my point here is, no, these guys didn't just come from average backgrounds, none of them. Basically, being poor to them meant not having a butler or having to clean your own room. And when we're told about a driver's humble beginnings, they're really just talking about a kid who couldn't necessarily afford everything they needed to climb up the motorsport ladder by themselves. But they could afford to start their career to begin with. The hard truth is, you'll never see a kid come from an actual poor background and make it into Formula 1. It's just not happening. I don't care what anyone says, it's not. And that's coming from me, so you know it's true. Motorsport is a sport for the rich. That's how it's been, that's how it is, and sadly, that's probably how it'll always be. And before anyone starts crying about how Hamilton rose up out of the streets of England to become statistically the greatest driver in Formula 1 history, I found a comment on a forum that sums it up perfectly, so I'll just read that. Obviously, Hamilton didn't come from a wealthy background, but it always irks me that people pretend he came from nothing. Lots of people remortgaged their house. That's referring to the fact that Lewis's dad remortgaged their house to pay for Lewis's Formula 1 career. They do it all the time to free up some cash. His dad spent it on Lewis's F1 career, others spend it on a new car, a big holiday, an extension to the house, and so on. They do it because they can afford to pay it back in the long run. Could Hamilton's dad afford to pay it back? Not if you were listening to a lot of what the media said at the time. Anthony Hamilton worked 3 jobs to keep Lewis racing. But he wasn't cleaning up in the morning, bricklaying in the day, and pulling pints at night. He was an IT contractor. Of course he could afford it. He took on 3 contracts at a time, like lots of contractors do, and got paid a packet for it. Hamilton may not have come from F1 royalty like Hill, Senna, and Rosberg, but he didn't come from the barrios either. I couldn't have said it better myself. No, really, I couldn't. That's why I said what they wrote. But that's not without saying that some of these guys came from exceptional wealth. Hamilton may not have had Alfred Pennyworth doing the laundry for him, but some of these drivers come from backgrounds that would make the likes of royalty jealous. Now, an obvious example is Lance Stroll, but you know what? What do you expect from a kid who's into motorsport and has a billionaire father? I personally think it would have been crazy if he hadn't picked up what he loved doing, and ended up being a lazy kid who simply leached off his dad's wealth and nothing else. I say good for him. I think a lot of people in his place wouldn't have strived to succeed in a career of their own like Lance did. And contrary to what many people believe, he's had a good bit of success throughout. But there are other drivers who get a lot less stick for their extremely wealthy backgrounds. Let's name a few, shall we? Lando Norris, Max Verstappen, Sergio Perez, Carlos Sainz, Nico Rosberg, Charles Leclerc, Daniel Ricciardo, Felipe Massa, Damon Hill, Ayrton Senna, Niki Lauda, Nelson Piquet Jr., and the list goes on. Now, I've basically mentioned some world-class drivers, but none of them came from a background quite as extreme as Lance. But that's irrelevant because my point here is that all of these world-class drivers all came from some serious money regardless. It doesn't matter if your daddy has 50 million or 3 billion in the bank. Rich is still rich. I'd say potentially, and of course this is assuming I've got all of the facts right, which of course I do because I never make mistakes, I'm just like that. One of the only drivers I know that actually came from humble beginnings is Esteban Ocon. And even then, he wasn't exactly poor. But compared to the guys he's up against on track, his life was one of hard knocks for sure. I mean, could you imagine having to walk to school? Or God forbid, live in a non-gated community? I mean, how does your body simply operate in those circumstances? Now look, I didn't exactly have a reason for this video. There's no end goal here other than to show that pretty much all drivers are to some extent daddy's cash. Some more than others obviously, but to single out one over all other drivers is a bit weird. Yeah, I'm calling you a weirdo. Now in some cases, there are drivers who don't deserve a seat in F1 but get one regardless because of daddy's cash. Is Lance one of those drivers? At the start of his F1 career, yes. But I think he's alright now, and considering his junior career and the fact that he can hold his own on a grid with the world's best drivers, I'd say he's fine. But in recent years, we've obviously seen drivers like Nicholas Latifi and Nikita Mazepin who obviously deserved a seat and worked extremely hard to get where they are. But anyway, that's about it guys. Like and subscribe to show some support to me and the channel, and please don't leave any negative comments because you'll hurt my feelings. Alright, that's it. God bless and bye bye.